My name is Nick, and I'm going to talk about some energy context stuff related to climate change and energy transitions and energy sources. This is supposed to be an introductory video and leading on to a couple other ones going into some more details. So the first thing I want to talk about is just energy in general, like what is energy? I think everybody's heard the sort of scientific definition of it's the ability to do work and things like that. But I actually have a favorite definition of energy, which is that it is a replacement for the labor of human beings. I really like that because it really kind of drives home the point that energy gives you freedom. We're inherently a little bit lazy. I think we can all admit it. If there's something we're doing and we want something else to do it for us, well, we're going to do it. And that actually gives us a quality of life. So, and that's what energy can do for us. And so, like, just some concrete examples, if you take construction, for instance, there was a time when construction was extremely laborious to the point that pharaohs got a bunch of slaves to carry giant bricks and make these huge pyramids, and it was it just wasn't a great time for the laborers. And so nowadays, when you're doing construction, it's still a lot of work, but you have people leveraging energy. So you have people sitting in a tower crane with a joystick, lifting tons of equipment again and again, just up to the top of where it's being built. And it's much more energy intensive, and it's much easier on the workers. Another example is farming. So how many of you out there hunt or gather or otherwise acquire 100% of the food for you and maybe your family? Usually it's not so many, unless you count going to the grocery store, but there was a time when people had to spend a huge amount of their time going out worrying about where they were going to get their next meal, and it's a life, but it's not necessarily the best life. And so because of energy, where we can mechanize a lot of farming, and so here you have a robotically controlled combine harvester that can collect food for untold thousands of people, thanks to energy. Well, that's great because people who still want to spend all their time getting food can choose to do that, but you don't have to. Because there's energy, we are free to do other things. We can do art or write a novel or look at cat videos or sit around in bed all day. Whatever you want, and you'll still be able to get food. That's because we have because energy is giving us that freedom. Another example is things like fetching water or doing laundry. There are places in the world where people will walk long distances every single day to fetch water or to go do a wash. And it can take up a huge amount of your time. And if that's the thing that you have to do to survive or to get by, well, you're going to do it. But if you had just a little bit of energy, a pipe and a pump, so you could turn a faucet on, or a washing machine that actually does the washing for you, all you have to do is fold it. Maybe someday it will fold, but not today. Anyway, the point is, your life can be dramatically improved with just a little bit of energy. And another example is travel. So you may be interested in traveling 6 weeks across the Oregon Trail, encountering all sorts of hardships. Or you can just hop on a plane and fly basically anywhere in the world. I mean, we have all these people today who have traveled. They have maps with pins in it. I've been to this country, and this country, and this country, and this country. That's all because of a very high energy transportation system, namely jet fuel in that case. And this is something where it's basically a new superpower. You used to be able to do it really slowly, but now you can do it almost whimsically. And so that gives, again, a lot of quality of life. And it's not just these examples. You can actually quantify this. So the United Nations has tried to quantify quality of life by creating an index called the Human Development Index. It's a composite that includes the economics, health, education, and a couple other things to try to approximate quality of life. And if you look at the graph, it's really astounding. This is a graph of Human Development Index as a function of electricity use per capita in a bunch of different countries. So here on kind of the lower part, you have the energy impoverished areas, not a lot of energy use. And what you see is that the slope is very, very steep. This means a tiny bit more energy has a dramatic improvement on somebody's quality of life in these places. By the way, the bubbles are proportional to the population of the place. It's basically a moral imperative to enable people to have more energy in these places. These people need more energy, and it will dramatically improve their lives. And it's not about having a certain lifestyle, it's about them having the life that they choose. And so I'm not going to tell people how to live their life, but I want them to have the choice so that they can choose how to live their own life in their own place, right? I think everyone can agree with that. And then you see another asymptote at the high energy places, and you see places like United States there, where if we get a little bit more energy, well, it doesn't really change our lives that much. In fact, we could cut back on energy more than a little, and it wouldn't really have a major negative impact on our lives. So that's a place where things like efficiency and conservation can make sense. But efficiency and conservation on this curve, you can't. You have to add more energy. There's no efficiency gain that's going to walk you to water faster. So anyway, that's the real story. So it's true. Energy and quality of life are highly correlated. Okay, so how does the world get its energy today? Well, here you go. This is a graph that shows total primary energy source everywhere in the world. So it's not just electricity. Electricity is less than half of our total energy. There's also heating for buildings and transportation. You can see those are big chunks. And so you see these gray ones are the fossil fuels. You've got your coal, your oil, and your natural gas. And then the green ones, which are green for a reason that will become clear, are hydro, nuclear, and the variable renewables, wind and solar, and geothermal, which is small, but it's in there. And so what you're seeing here is that we're about 84%-ish fossil fueled in this world. Now, before I go ahead and trash fossil fuels, which I'm about to do, I want to take a quick sidetrack and point out that actually fossil fuels have provided a serious service to humanity because of this quality of life issue. Over the last couple hundred years, fossil fuels have powered every major kind of industrial and civilizational and artistic thing that's happened in a sense. I mean, electrification has been called the greatest invention of the entire 20th century, which, considering what was done in the 20th century, is pretty impressive. It's electrification that sort of allowed a lot of that stuff to happen. You think of going to the moon. Well, that fuel is derived from fossil. Many things that are associated with quality of life have happened powered by fossil fuels. We know there's problems with fossil fuels, but they've done a lot of good for us. And so we're at a point where we kind of have to like thank fossil fuels and say you've done a great service, thank you fossil fuels, but there's some problems with you, and so we need to kind of kick you out, to transition away from you, is kind of the way I see it. So what are the problems with fossil fuel? Well, I think some of them are pretty obvious, but let's go in order from localized to global. There are some extremely important and critical health risks going on because of combustion right now. And it's not all because of fossil fuel, it's actually in some cases because of biofuel that's been hunted and gathered. So at the most fundamental level, or at the most intimate level, there are roughly 1 billion people who don't have a lot of energy and need to cook and heat. And to do that, they're using hunted and gathered biofuel. So it's dung and it's wood. And they're bringing it into their house, and they're starting a fire and combusting that material inside their house to cook and heat. And this is for survival and sustenance. And what happens is the smoke, when you burn something, it makes smoke. And so the smoke comes around in your house and you breathe it. And when you breathe smoke, that's not good for the lungs. It causes respiratory diseases, and it actually is causing the premature death of somewhere around 4 million people every single year. So it's a critical health emergency to get people away from dirty indoor cooking and heating. So that's the most intimate level of problem. And again, that's not really fossil fuel, that's just air pollution from what's effectively biofuel. And then you say, okay, oh, and by the way, if you were to switch from that to like natural gas and have a natural gas heater in their house, that would be better from a air pollution and lung health point of view for sure. Which brings us to our next challenge, which is the fossil fuel problem. So now you have big central fossil fuel plants in urban areas, say, and they're combusting. I mean, fossil fuel and biofuel, their job is to take carbon and burn it in the presence of oxygen in the air to create CO2 and energy. That's what combustion is, plus a bunch of smoke. So anything that's using combustion is making CO2 plus energy plus a bunch of smoke. So that's the combustion bad is going to be a theme here. So anyway, when you have these central power plants, you start getting smog. You start getting air pollution at the urban level. And that is killing another 4 million people per year, according to the World Health Organization. And so now you're up to roughly 8 million people dying early every single year because we are combusting the biofuels and the fossil fuels. This is no good. So that's sort of, that's one of the huge problems with combustion. Okay? So, okay, but there's more problems, right? Well, another kind of classic problem with fossil fuel that people have worried about for a really long time is just how much of it there is. And this was really worried about kind of in the 70s, and people still were talking about peak oil in the 2000s-ish. But nowadays, because of technological advances in things like horizontal drilling and fracking, there's a pretty significant amount of fossil fuel left on Earth. There's a pretty vast resource, and the more people go looking for it, it just keeps on showing up. So we're getting better extraction technology, which is cool stuff from an engineering point of view, but we aren't really going to run out of fossil fuel really anytime soon. I won't make a prediction, but it's not an urgent need like the air pollution health problems are. There's a third problem. Anyone think of it? Obviously climate change. So again, I said you take carbon, oxygen, burn it, you get energy and CO2. Well, the CO2 is a greenhouse gas. We know for a fact that the CO2 levels in the atmosphere are going up every single year. They're going up at a rate basically the same as what we are emitting from all of our various industrial systems that burn carbon-derived fuels. And we know that there's a greenhouse effect. We detected it on Venus. 1988, James Hansen testified to Congress and said, we now can say definitively that we've detected the greenhouse effect here on Earth, and it's a serious problem. And anyway, you can kind of see the amount of CO2 for the last, 10,000 years. And then if you look here, there's a little bloop. That's our huge increase from the Industrial Revolution. And it's not so much that a warmer Earth is inherently dangerous. It may not be. In fact, glaciation, I've heard, is actually rare on Earth, according to a geologist I know, Jim Conca. But that doesn't mean this isn't bad. That means what's really a problem is the rate of change. So we are causing a forcing effect through greenhouse gas that is causing a rate of change that's so serious and so fast that things may have trouble keeping up with it. And living things don't like change. They can evolve with it, and humans are particularly good at evolving because we can manipulate the environment. But still, it's a very dangerous rate of change, and a lot of unpredictable and perhaps serious things could happen. So we're now concerned, obviously, about climate change. So we're not on track is a serious problem, though. In 2018, worldwide carbon emissions went up 2%. They need to be going down and fast, but it actually went up in 2018. So mostly driven by oil expansion, believe it or not. There are places in the world that are decreasing, but overall in the world it's still going up, so it's the wrong direction. So what do we do? What is the right direction? Well, it's relatively simple. For energy, we just take a look at this graph, which I have on my t-shirt, which just says for any given energy source, if you want to get 1 kilowatt hour of electricity out of it, which is a measure of electricity, this graph shows how much carbon will be emitted, or carbon dioxide equivalent, so it could be methane still, is emitted for each energy source. So you can see if you're getting a kilowatt hour out of coal, you create a lot of carbon dioxide. If you use biomass, it also produces a lot. Even though biomass has a sink when it grows again, you're still increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere if you burn a lot of these, and that's what matters. That's what causes warming forcing is how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. It doesn't matter if it's going to come out later if you're putting it in faster. So it's pretty bad. Natural gas is a little bit better than coal. And then you have another dedicated biomass here. And then you have all the low carbon energy sources. You've got your solar, your geothermal, your hydropower, your tidal, your wind, and your nuclear power. So it's relatively simple. We just need to switch from these, which are 84% of our energy, to these, which are low carbon. That's it. Right now, we are doing a lot of transitions from coal to natural gas. Coal, because of fracking and because of horizontal drilling, natural gas has become extremely cheap. And it turns out a natural gas turbine is a highly efficient, cheap to run, cheap to build machine. It's a jet engine bolted to the ground. It's fairly easy to run. And so with cheap fuel and a cheap system, well, and it's cleaner, it burns cleaner, so it doesn't cause nearly as much air pollution as coal, that's for sure. But it does still create a massive amount of greenhouse gas. And not only are the direct emissions still pretty bad, but there's also these natural gas pipelines that leak methane, and methane is a much stronger greenhouse gas. Again, if you build a lot of them, even though methane comes out of the atmosphere faster, if you're building a lot of pipelines that are leaking and you're increasing the overall methane concentration in the air, which is happening, well, you've got yourself a problem. So at the moment, there's a lot of people kind of celebrating because carbon emissions in certain countries are going down. A lot of that, like in the United States, is completely driven by people transitioning from coal to natural gas. That's not a win. We should not be celebrating that. We have to be going from these to these. Going from coal to natural gas is like going from terrible to really bad. It's better, but it's not something that anyone should be proud of or trying to do. You'll notice that I have a thing that says nuclear is among the lowest carbon forms of energy we know. Nuclear is a little bit unique among these low carbon energy sources in that it is the only one that can run 24/7 and can be built basically anywhere regardless of geography. So I think we all know wind and solar are variable and they come and go with the wind and the sun and require huge amounts of backup one way or the other. It's largely done by natural gas right now, which is very high carbon. You can talk about backing it up with pumped hydro or batteries. Batteries in particular require a lot of energy to produce and a lot of energy to recycle. And you end up getting into a situation where the energy you put to manufacture the system is kind of close to the energy you get out of the system when you operate it. And so it's called the energy return on investment starts to look a little bit too low to sustain industrialized civilization if you do lots of backup with things like batteries. Pumped hydro may be better where you can do it. There's some concerns about methane emissions that come out of a reservoir, but those are it's kind of new. People are still studying it. It seems worse in tropical areas. But anyway, the problem with that is like there just aren't that many places where you can build a gigantic dam on top of a huge hill. It's geographically limited. So, and geothermal, of course, you can do in Iceland and parts of California, but not too many other places at large scale. So here you have nuclear, which uses very small amounts of land, uses very small amounts of raw materials, total life cycle, and it makes a very small amount of waste, which is actually kept on site entirely for the life cycle of the plant, eventually slated for ultimate disposal. So anyway, it's sort of unique in that it's a pretty interesting 24/7 energy source that can be built anywhere and doesn't have a very big footprint. The reason any of these have carbon emissions at all is that it's a full life cycle analysis. So this goes from greenfield to mining all the equipment and fuel, if there's fuel, and then building all the things and then operating it. And that takes carbon for certain things. Like you got to go out and mine steel and produce concrete to build this stuff. And so there is a carbon effect in the full life cycle, even though the photoelectric effect doesn't do combustion and make carbon dioxide. And even though splitting a uranium atom doesn't release carbon dioxide, there's still indirect effects, and that's what these numbers are representing. So there you go. That's the basic intro, and I'll be doing a follow-up video that's going to talk a little bit about the history of the science behind splitting atoms for energy, direct mass to energy conversions, and then I'll do more kind of talking about exactly what a nuclear reactor is and talking about some of the challenges and solutions associated with that. So thanks. I hope that was useful. Have a good one.